Beginning with Illustrator, we're going to walk you through the workspace to start. So when you first launch Illustrator and you um, kick off with a new document, your workspace might look slightly different than what you are seeing here. First and foremost, this is also a Mac platform, so things might be slightly different than what you might be seeing on a PC. But to start things off, what we want to do is set up our workspace. I really recommend going up to Window Workspace and hitting Essentials Classic. This is going to give you all of the menu options on the right-hand side. It's going to give you your tools over on the left-hand side. It's going to give you a control panel up here. This is something fairly new. It's called a contextual toolbar. This might be helpful for you as when you're using one of your tools, have some options that are accessible here. Someone that's quite familiar with Illustrator, it is something that I prefer to turn off. And you can do that by going Window, Contextual Taskbar, and turn that off. Up in here, this is our control panel. So this is where you can turn that on off. Again, I recommend putting that up. This is kind of like the contextual bar. So any of those commonly used tools, options are set up here. Again, you will start to learn your preference when you start to work in Illustrator a little bit more, but I strongly recommend this. One of the other things that might be set up automatically is an application frame. So this is going to open up so it hits a full screen. Again, being a Mac user, I prefer not to have that, so I turn that off. Certain things that we have that we will walk through a little bit more later is we have our rulers, which can be turned on and off. We have a lot of basic tools where we'll walk through all of those. And again, all of these options over on the right-hand side will give us a plethora of different things that we'll walk through as the semester goes along. Let's go ahead and look at how we start a document. So if we say File New, or when you initially launch Illustrator, you're greeted with a new document window. Because I use Illustrator often, I do have a recent tab here, but you do have some predetermined sizes that you can use. If you go ahead and open one of your own files in there, it will have a predetermined size as well. But for instance, if I want to start something new, this is how we do this. So we have an option to select a variation of sizes. I generally work in inches. I would say inches or centimeters would be best for you. Pixels and such in Illustrator, not really what we work in. So I would say inches would be good. You can select any size you want. When we're talking about bleed, that's this little red mark around that artboard there. The bleed is if you think, for example, if you're going to print a big poster and you want images or color to go all the way off the page, that's where we add a little bit extra to that printout. So when we cut, we can see it. So this may or may not be something you use, but I always have that on as a default. The color mode, depending as you've learned about colors. So if we're looking at it on screen, we're going to be keep it in RGB. If we're printing, we're in CMYK. And we can just go ahead and press create. So once we have our size in here, say for example, now we're looking to change the size. So you think, okay, I don't really want an 8.5 by 11 artboard. What I'm looking at now is maybe I want a square. I can do this by going File, Document Setup, or I can go over here and hit Document Setup. Then this prompt opens up. You can see my bleed is set there. You can see my measurement is here. The rest of the stuff you don't really need to worry yourself with. But if I do want to change that size, I can go Edit Artboard. And you can see up in that control panel, you can see that exact size. So if I want this to be 11 inches tall, you can see I now have an artboard that's 11 by 11. I always go ahead and just hit that black arrow to close out of that. But if I also don't want to go File, Document Setup, I also have it accessible up here. So I can save Document Setup, Edit Artboards, and maybe I want to bring it back to 8.5. But I do want to highlight here in the constraining proportion. So right now I can change the size of this and it's not going to affect my width, for example. So say I want to make sure that I do keep these same proportions. If I turn that lock on, if I say 11 inches high, you can see it auto adjusts that width here. And again, we'll just go ahead and hit that black arrow. And that's walking us through the basics of our artboards. If, for example, we want to add an additional artboard, so say we have some sort of art here, maybe we want to duplicate it, or maybe we want to include an additional page. Again, we can go to Document Setup and we can say Edit Artboards. And you can see what my arrow turns into over here. It has a little kind of an almost plus sign with a square attached to it. This is where I can manually and freely go and make an artboard of any size. I personally like my artboards to align. I like to just plunk a size on there, and then what I do is go ahead afterwards and I can manually set that size up. You're gonna hit that black arrow and you are set. One last way you can do that, you also have that artboard button accessible over in that toolbar, so you can go ahead and click that as well. So there's multiple ways that you can do that. So we're going to talk about our selection tools. So what we have here is we have two different arrows. We have a black arrow that is called the selection arrow. And if we hit the letter V, we can access this. This is good to select whole objects or multiple objects. So we can click and drag. So say I had multiple different elements on here. If I click and drag this, I'm selecting all of those. Or if I just select one, I can go ahead and adjust the size. So I can scale this up or scale this down. If I go ahead and use that white arrow, this one's called the direct select tool, or hitting the letter A. This is for a little bit more precision. So we use this to manipulate specific points of an object. So for instance, if I had a square here, maybe I want to just adjust one point of it, I can use this little direct select tool to get into there. That'll become a little more clear once we get into our shape tool. So over here in our toolbar, I believe by default it's on square, but if I click and hold this down, I'm able to access various shapes. So if we go ahead and use that shape tool, I can click and drag and create any shape. If I want this to be a perfect square, I can hit Shift, and that gives me a perfect square. To click away from there, I can hit the letter V, or I can go ahead and just click that letter V over here and click away. So you can see now, if I use that black arrow, I can go and I can move this anywhere. I can bring this over into the corner and I can adjust the shape of this. But say, for example, I want to just make this point come all the way out to the side. I'm going to go ahead and use that white direct select arrow, and I'm going to just click that one point. So you can see now that this is blue and the rest of these are a blue outline with white. I can then go and adjust that square. So now we have a funny little shape with this point coming out here. If I want to move this square, I'm going to use that black arrow and I'm going to click and I'm going to bring it over into here, into the center of that page. Some other things that we'd like to look at when we are using our shapes is the corners of those shapes. If I want to adjust the corner of those shapes, again, I can go over that white arrow. And if I just click this point, you can see this little circle show up here. Alternatively, if I click it with the black arrow, and then I go over to my white arrow, you can see 4 little points show up. So you can access this a few ways. You can select this, hold Shift, and you can select all of them. And as you can see, when I hit those points, that little circle pops up. What that little circle does is changes the radius of those corners. So if I go ahead and click one of these, because I have all those selected, it's going to universally adjust the corner radius of those. If I just go and use that white arrow, so I use that direct select and hit here, that means I'm just manipulating this arrow. Another way we can do this is if we select this and then again go over to that direct select, you can see what changes up here. So we can see when we go in the black arrow what our control panel is showing. But if I use that white arrow, I'm getting into the details and the specifics of this shape. I now get an option up here that says corners. I can go ahead and adjust this. And again, this will universally adjust those corners. So now I have a little shape that's showing all of the different, it has all consistent corners on there. And again, if I go and I click over into the corner of maybe one specific area. I can also, in addition, adjust the corners from here. Alternatively, if I have a basic shape such as a square or a circle and my transform menu is open, so window, transform, in case it isn't on default over here, you can also see the options over here to adjust the radius of our corners. And you can see here it's linked. So if I unlink, I can manually bring that one corner in. So there's a few ways that we can access those corners of the shapes. Moving back to that shape tool, say for example, I need a circle that's a specific size. I need it to be a half inch by a half inch. If I go ahead and I grab that circle and I hold down my shift, I can see those little numbers coming up in that gray box. And I can also maybe create any size that I want and then go ahead and adjust my width and height over in here in my transform, or also up in that control panel. Alternatively, I can also click that circle, and if I do one quick click, we get an option that comes up where I can specify the exact size that I want. So let's say 0.5 by 0.5, and we press OK, and you can see that there's our perfectly sized arrow, or circle, sorry. When we work with our polygon tool, if we immediately plug this in here, the more we turn this, we're actually turning the points of that shape. You can place that any way you would like. And same thing, all those corner radius will become available. But say, for example, I want an octagon. So I need to have 8 sides to this. I can, same thing, click. So now I can say what I want my radius to be for the size, but I can now specifically say how many sides to that shape that I would like. Just going to go ahead and up that stroke so you folks can see. So that's a nice way that you can go ahead and create various sizes. This is also good if you need to create a triangle. So if I go to that polygon tool and I click, if I say 3 sides, there's my triangle. Incorporating some of those tools that we've used, again, we can go over to that white arrow and I can maybe just select the one point and I can pull that arrow out, holding shift so it stays in place. And then if we also use that white arrow, we can go ahead and adjust the corners. Another way we can select objects is by using the Lasso tool, which is over here on the toolbar. So if I go ahead and click that, so say, just like that image, that preview image that came up there, if I have lots of images and instead of going and selecting each one manually, I can use this to just click and drag around the objects and select. Again, in this sort of instance, using the lasso probably isn't the best tool to use. You'd be most inclined to use your black arrow to just select one shape, and then you can hold shift to select the other, or alternatively, you can click and drag to select both of those at the same time. If I say have a lot of objects on here that I need to maybe move at the same time or maybe delete, we can also go select all, and that selects all of the objects that are on there as well. Again, super helpful if we need to, maybe if I have a whole bunch of artwork here, maybe I need to move it from here to here or duplicate from here to here, I can just go and say select all, or on a Mac is Command A, and then I can just go and edit, copy, and then edit, paste, and then move those together.